remembering 24 hours a day, this, life itself, and you people, there is a continuing something that I will mention again. Some of this will be repertinent to you people getting this on tape in other places. Some of you newer people, both here where we're doing this recording and these other cities getting it by tape. To varying degrees, all of you started out in some sort of search, and the belief was that you were looking for, and if you were successful, you would find a great experience. And I could not incorrectly divide up life and such things as this into a kind of knowledge and a kind of experience. And everyone starts out believing in some way, whether they're trying to chase a guru down or whether they start out reading obscure occult books or studying exotic religions, that they will find in Buddha's words, or they will find some mystical meaning in the Talmud. They'll find some way in a witchcraft book to draw patterns on the floor and whirl about and drink hot lead and produce an experience. All of you started that way. Now, even though you did not have my division in those two words of knowledge and experience, you might have thought at the time that you were gaining some sort of knowledge by reading certain books, even my books perhaps, that you're going to get some kind of unusual knowledge that would lead to an unusual experience. Now, some of you here, and many of you getting this from afar on tape, will begin to experience a lack of this extraordinary experience. That is, if you were, through your own wiring system, going by the common comparisons in which you had picked up from other people or from reading the newspaper or books about joining some cult, some would-be mystical group, and that their adherents will state that as soon as they traveled to such and such place and joined up with this commune, that the master teacher gave them a secret word, gave them a new name, gave them a particular dance or some kind of meditation to do, and voila, a week later they're on the street singing his praises and they're dancing up and down and saying this too could happen to you. Now, up until now, all religions, all forms of mysticism, right up until today, have been involved with almost entirely. And for those of you who don't understand it, drop the almost. Almost entirely has been involved with the experience, and the experience was limited to the lower circuits, the older circuits. We're talking about experience even today, and even 3,000 years ago, we're talking about experience that touched primarily, almost entirely, what I have been calling the red and the blue circuit. It did not bring about, nor was it involved with, any sort of yellow circuit experience. That is no great secret. It's never been described in that way, but you've read enough. You should have been able to read enough in your own nervous system by now to realize that those kinds of experiences are experiences I'm sure many of you had on hallucinogenic drugs before you got involved with this, that there seemed to be an absolutely astounding experience that took place. It does not just have to be mushrooms and LSD. There are people every day walking in churches in this civilized part of the planet. They're walking in and they sing and dance, and somebody preaches from a holy book and they scream and shout. They ask them to come forward and proclaim their allegiance to that particular God and to cry and to beg his forgiveness. The person goes through some process. Now, within 15 minutes, they may stand up and the look on their face look completely different. They may say, "Praise be to all the gods, I have found the experience, this is it, this is what I've been looking for, I've wasted my whole life, I should have come here long before now." Jump, holler, shake, hug each other, praise the minister, praise the gods that be. But it involves almost none other than everything affects every little part of a human, remember. All energy is going to affect something. But note, it has almost nothing to do with any sort of new knowledge. It is an experience. For you newer people, out on tape, I'll point out, it is not some contest for me to single myself out, that there is nobody on this planet doing anything. There are people doing all sorts of things. Life has people involved with aspects of trying to increase the evolutionary speed of man. But even until today, there is almost nothing involved on this planet with what I have been doing with you people. But it can seem to people first involved with this, and it doesn't really matter your background or how you stumbled upon this, that everyone expects an immediate experience. They seem to be available, if not through drugs, they seem to be available from gurus and systems and groups that you've heard about. But it has reached the time for certain people, or I would not be here and life would not have drafted me into this, that there are people sitting here and in some of the other cities that you have had an experience, not limited to just one, but an experience, and the experience is almost, as far as words will go, a new one in life, because the experience is the discovery that astounding or new understanding itself is experience. It is not just a tingling in the blue circuit, it is not just a revving up, a somewhat blurring of the binary distinctions within the red circuit that make people get up, smile, hug their fellow follower of some group or some church, and to sing the praises of the Lord, to run out in the street and not hesitate to grab people and say, you should come and join this group. Those experiences are as real as anything else. They're as real as people's imagination. They're as real as flying saucers and bricks. I just bring this up as a preface tonight to tell you, especially some of you newer people that's never heard any mention of this, that I am aware of that. And I'm aware that for a while, people can feel as though I'm holding back something, or when is the experience coming. And I know how to produce them, but that's not what this is about. It is not that there is no experience, but it is closer to what I've just described of people discovering that a certain kind of knowledge is not available, a certain kind of knowledge that ignites unused systems within man's circuitry, that as opposed to blue and red experience, that itself is an experience. And I should have brought a party horn or played some music when I said that is the experience, because for those who need it, and there are a group of people on this planet, small though they may be, that do need it now, and that the experience that could be available at the red or blue circuit that are still available in other places, that once you taste the experience of this kind of extraordinary knowledge, then that is, for those who need it, that is the supreme experience. In a sense, after that, if you ever have occasion to think about it, you would know how to produce your own in lower circuits. If that was still your want, that I would like to have a good Southern Baptist Assembly of God experience, or a good mystical Jewish experience, or I would like to be blown away with some kind of Buddhist experience, or the kind of experience of understanding I'm talking about. If you had occasion to really go back and ponder this, I suggest to you that you could figure out how to do your own. If not, by that time I could tell you within about 30 seconds. A piece connected to last week that I want to reinforce is without E being present, there is no situation, there is no problem, there is no discernible circumstance. That if you could live a life, if you could live an hour with no E, it would be an hour in which you would, for all intents and purposes, have not lives. You would not be aware of any situation. You wouldn't be aware of any problem. You wouldn't be conscious of any circumstance. When there is a situation, this is by your own perception of it, that there is a situation, I give you your choice, in a way that your own wiring system wanted to define it, that there is a situation, a problem, or a circumstance. If at any time, if I suddenly leaped out of the bushes and said, all right, are you right now in the midst of a situation, a problem, or a circumstance, and you admitted, lo, yea, verily, you got me, I am. Then I'm telling you within that situation, problem, or circumstance would reside E. And E would be alive always, it would be pertinent, and it would be dynamic. But at the binary level, it would appear to be irrelevant. But if you could, I'm just giving you another way shortly, I was going to leave this with you, that if you could attempt to look at it this way, that if you could take out E, if you could define it enough, that you could get a large part of E in this situation, problem, or circumstance, and you could set it aside, you would no longer have a situation, problem, or circumstance. It's that simple. I guess I will leave it to any of you who are very astute to figure out of what practical value that may or may not be. I guess it's according to how many people in here would like to be, whenever they chose, to be free from a situation, problem, or circumstance. I will not at this time, however, entertain any mechanical line-level voices that might want to ask, well, if I did that and I did not have a situation, problem, or circumstance, what would I have? We're pressed for time tonight. I do not have time to go into that. I guess we can leave it at the rationally fictitious or fictitious rationally insane man level and say that if you don't run the risk of not having a situation, problem, or circumstance, then perhaps you had better not do this. You had better not even entertain this and just file it away until such time that you find that you have a surfeit, an overload, you have OD'd, or else you have grown tired of a situation, a problem, or a circumstance. Could anyone gather this? That if we speak of, which I am and which most people live in, a binary universe, there can be no answers, there can be no solutions. Living at the level that ordinary humanity lives consciously, totality of the circuits put together that make man unique, in the binary universe there can be no answer to anything, and there can be no solution. Before I go any further, I'll tell you right quick, if I must, it would stop the triaxial dance. But if you can get any glimpse of this yourself, then you're no longer left with a kind of lingering question to yourself of me pointing out that nobody's ever had an answer for anything and no so-called problem has ever been solved. Now, you can have a lingering sensation within your own voices that your partner can tell you, well, that's not true. That's not true. There's been answers to things, and there's not. Or there's been problems that a solution was discovered, and it's not true. Some of you that might still have partners that would speak loud enough that you could hear them that would want to conflict with that. Some of you, in better moments, have even come up with little aphorisms, truisms, little sketches of poetry, wherein some of you have noted, mostly on your own, that for every question that seems to be answered, the answer seems to bring about another question. I assume it will not hurt anyone's feelings to know that that's not a new observation. That goes back again almost as far as the Yellow Circuit has been writing, talking, and remembering. That is one way to approach what I am speaking of. But outside of what might appear to be a theoretical realm, out here is inside of you. Has there ever been a real question that an answer at line level, at ordinary level of consciousness, any question you ever had, that an answer was forthcoming in some way, and it just wiped it all out? That was the end of it. There was a period, that's it. Phew, what a relief. One down, a few more to go. All you've got to do is be able to look into your own nervous system history without taking it personally, and you'll find out under ordinary conditions, there has never been such an occurrence, or there's never been a problem that simply had a solution. You discovered it, someone gave it to you, you wrestled it from the bowels of the earth, and here was a solution, and whatever was the problem just went. It closed the book, that's it, you walked away, and that was no memory of it, nothing was tied to it. It's not true. That quite literally, at the binary level, there can be no answer. There can be no solution. Because remember, we're talking about, I keep saying remember as best you can, of this strange picture that I try to conjure up at times for you of a triaxial dance, or three spheres within one another, and all three being independent, and all three being inside of each other, and all three being outside of each other. In ordinary consciousness, seeing two things go on at once, seeing a binary world, that if indeed we're only working with, in a sense, shadows, we're only working with 2/3 of one level of reality, that if indeed there could be a, quote, answer, a, quote, solution, then you would stop the triaxial dance, because you would take the two binary, the two aspects, let us just say C and D, that were going on, if they could be answered at the ordinary level, if consciousness saw, perceived this conflict going on between two forces, and suddenly ordinary consciousness thought it had perceived an answer to this, then it would freeze the movement between two of those, and the triaxial dance itself would fall apart. That is, believe it or not, a fairly scientific explanation, except there are no scientific terms and there is no scientific experimentation upon which I can draw your attention to other sources. If the question, if you can see the religious connection to so-called cultural religious phenomenon, the eternal question about good and evil, what in the world is going on? How come humanity is not improving from a humanistic viewpoint or from a religious viewpoint? How can the gods allow this to go on? This great question, how can we have good here and evil here? There has never been an answer to that at the binary world. There's never been a solution to it. But if somebody could, it would not be a boon. It would not be an improvement. Because if some answer, this is not possible, but follow me like every time else, if suddenly somebody could find an answer that everyone who heard it said that's the answer, you would take the forces, the reality behind the perception of good and evil, and you would freeze them. They would stop. It would be a solution to nothing, because you've got another partner involved with this that was still trying to move, that has to move for there to be any situation, problem, or circumstance. You would have killed the whole dance. You would destroy everything. The moon's not getting bigger, is it? I'm not going to try and conjure up any further examples for this, but I will repeat to you that there is a scientific basis, in the real sense of the word, that you can see, that makes it absolutely forbidden at the ordinary level that there be answers or solutions. But at the ordinary level, to force their own definition, apparently things move right along and get better and progress on the basis of what? Answers and solutions. But if there were true answers that took any question, there were solutions that apparently cured any problem, any specific problem, if there's any consequence at all. If that could happen, you would be killing life itself. And if somebody could come up with an answer to something really big, it could very likely be mortally woundful to life's body. It's not going to happen. But then all the questions, all the people wondering, not all the people, but surely there are one or two here and there that went ahead and got a master's, if not a PhD, in philosophy. And surely after graduation went and had a few beers and wondered, why did I waste my whole life? I still don't know why there's good and evil. I still don't know whether man is actually thinking about reality or whether his thinking just produces reality. That was a small joke, but that shows how well the jokes about philosophy go over in this. No offense to the audience, I have never seen an audience that had a particular sense of humor about philosophy. And to bypass any of your own voices, if you think it'd be different to go address a convention of philosophers and try philosophy humor, now you people would make that kind of audience look like a still photograph. I would suggest that this is the sort of thing that I'm mentioning tonight, just now, based upon this tremendous impact it is having, that at least you try and remember it, because as far as words go, it is very pertinent, and they can take you somewhere else. That in the binary world, there can be no answers or solutions. That's just a scientific fact. And it should interest you, even if it did not have a particular impact on you, it should interest you enough to realize that you and everyone else thinks there must be an answer, there must be a solution. And then looked at from another way, there are none, never have been, they're not forthcoming. But then to see, well, this is not a problem. The closest thing to a problem is, I never realized this. It's not a problem that there are no answers or solutions. Contraire, it would be a problem, as I tried to point out to you in that non-existent universe, if somebody could produce, discover, invent, conjure up a real answer or solution. They would have accomplished nothing. They would have dealt even possibly a mortal blow to life's body if this insane proposition that I am detailing were possible. But notice you and everyone else, even on the basis, part of the basis of your entry into this, you thought, well, I am going to get an answer. I will get a solution, and it will produce this extraordinary experience wherein my eyes will whirl in my head, and I'll become more attractive, etc. There is no problem on the basis that ordinary life does not produce answers or solutions. I recommend that you at least remember that until at such time if I remember to come back to this. I want to draw you several things. I don't know whether they're too simple or too complex. If you took this as being you, the circle, that is, if you're an ordinary person. Ordinary people feel in general that energy is coming into them, coming to them, is available to them from external, horizontal means, out there, not I. Now the few would be able to feel themselves becoming a channel for energy coming from another direction. And to continue with my two-dimensional drawings and even three-dimensional attempted descriptions, we're talking about then energy that's compared to my first note would be vertical, and in fact, if you can follow this right quick, it'd actually be vertically non-dimensional. But compared to the sensation that energy, what seems to be the reasons for living, what seems to keep one going, at your ordinary level and everyone else's, you should be able to feel what I'm saying, it apparently comes from right out there. The few can feel energy that at line level consciousness you're never aware of, not to any profitable degree, but you can feel, of course none of this is directional in these senses, because remember that map I had made where I showed you people that Antarctica was actually on the top of the map. You remember that? And the subcontinent of India was pointing upward. A few people on getting this on tape, trust me. Or if you don't want to trust me, go get a big old map of the world and turn it upside down, trace out the major countries, continents, oceans, and write in their names upside down, color it if you'd like, and hang it on your wall. Back to the immediate subject. The descriptions, as far as directions, are fair since I've got to compare it, and you should be able now to follow some of it. That under all ordinary conditions of what seems to make life worthwhile, what seems to get you going, what seems to be your interest, an ordinary person, all the way from money, sex, fame, food, rest, the energy, insults, anger, attacks, sorrow, the energy, the sensation is that it's flowing from out there in here on a very horizontal level, operating right on the plane of life moving around, everyone looking straight ahead at best, and usually a little downward. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that it apparently is energy coming in horizontally from out there. Now the reality of this has been described in many ways. All of you have read enough religious literature, had your own bad dreams in the past, that life operating in such a way as to try all sorts of things are the instances that I oftentimes refer to as accidental. People out apparently following some religious trek, people who have described apparent religious experiences in the past, having experiences and no particular knowledge about it. They have this feeling. I'm about to get to simplicity itself. I don't know why I took all the trouble for this preface. The feeling of gods. People who say, gods are speaking to me. All my life I have wanted to have a greater love for my fellow man, and suddenly a voice spoke to me, all the way from low-level mystics to mystics that had a very good background, from famous mystics to infamous mystics. None of them say, I heard a voice, and I went, what? The prophets and all the holy books, they do not say, I was walking down the road feeling bad. Walking down that road, no, feeling, never mind. They do not say, and suddenly the voice of God said, Hubert, and I looked around at the bush and said, what? It's always, they never say it came from behind a tree. It came from a window in a house. And it is the feeling. It's not just a joke again. It is, everything is a reflection of reality. But there is a sensation that people have that have no knowledge of it. They're left at a very low level knowledge of it, which is the religious level. That I am having urges that are not worldly. I'm beginning to have urges that I want to help my fellow man. I can no longer laugh at people who are different from me. I can no longer ignore hunger. There seems to be something pushing me, and I can't tell you what. I was not brought up religiously. In fact, I've been a drunkard and all that, which always makes the good kind of prophets and preachers. And they say, but now I feel energy coming to me. I feel something urging me to carry on. And they don't know exactly what to say, but they know it is not routine inputs of energy. Nobody's telling me this. No human. It's otherworldly. It's other directional. And I feel this energy. And when it's on me, I'm just not an ordinary person. There is an absolute reality to it. How about a little equation? I said the few should be able, or they will, begin to feel themselves as a channel. You can feel energy coming from somewhere else, from another direction, apparently. But rather than worry about, what's the few, I'm not talking about all great, fully activated and miraculous people. But as far as a question about experience, and when is something astounding, if ever, going to happen to me, and me relive what I imagine happened to Guru X, or the girl that married my cousin who went to this commune, and she came back and went, phew, and told us stories that, wow, I could hardly believe, like man. There should already be a basis, or at least you should try and remember. I'll give you one of my instant equations. At the very least, you should be able to do something like this if you're going to make an equation. It's to be able to feel, say, 10%, and then let the remainder of it be out here. But as long as you're looking for, as long as you're prepared to accept, as long as that is all you need, that the energy that comes from out here, everything I mentioned, and any other thing you can think of, besides money, greed, cars, sex, fill it in. Nothing wrong with it. Notice I didn't put up some figure about 100%. But as long as you can be fed, as long as you can be satisfied in a tolerable manner from the energy that comes horizontally from out there, then you can wait around for a mystical experience for a long time. See if you can find any connection. This is where the basis of me saying that maybe this is either too simplistic or too complex. How about another one? Pressure. Ordinary people ordinarily feel pressure to be either something coming from out there, not I, or it is an internal pressure coming from what is apparently oneself. It is a dual pressure. And I suggest to you, as all of my drawings and symbols and visual inventions, it is all-encompassing. Because that's it. At the ordinary level, where do you ever feel pressure from? There's only two choices. It's either somebody out there is putting pressure on me, or there's something in here. The good old I'm going nuts syndrome. I've been so mistreated in the past, it's built up in me, and my whole psyche is a festering sore. The few. Let me just for the time being grant you that the pressure is still possible. It could still be extant under those conditions. But it's like the understanding, it's the discovery of a kind of positive pressurization that would have more of that configuration. Now down in here, of course, would fall in with what ordinary people would ordinarily call ordinary suffering, which I told you cannot be tolerated to any great degree, and pursue this. You cannot suffer over what happened in your past. You cannot suffer over who you've known that's died. You cannot suffer over whether you are not quite as attractive as Robert Redford. Of course, some of you women, I guess that would be to your advantage not to be as attractive as Robert Redford or the late Orson Welles. But the pressure, this is the state of ordinary suffering. Now, I could have drawn it in two stages, but it's always, they're connected, as you should know by now. The energy is flowing through, but ordinary consciousness can very quickly, just from moment to moment, if it was engaged in, if I could intrigue it into coming up with some sort of scheduled observation, continual observation of pressure. You can feel, all right, I'm getting pressure. I'm talking here to a possible client in my business. They're pressuring me about, they want me to cut the money. They want delivery faster and faster. And I'm even thinking about what my boss is going to say when I get back. And suddenly he stops and he has to answer the phone. But then you and your partner might say, wait a minute, now the pressure seems to have shifted because he's not really talking to me. But now it's the pressure of me because all my life I've always wanted to impress my father. People say things like that because they hear psychologists say things like that, and I guess psychologists say things like that because somewhere they heard somebody say something like that, and I don't care to pursue that any further. But then the person could sit there and apparently this internal then be it. I'm getting very upset. I've always had a very low tolerance for pressure. The stress is beginning to get me. But it is, in a sense, an equalization of this kind of pressure. That sometimes you apparently are getting it from out there, and sometimes it's from in here. A kind of positive pressurization, though, is when you have a pressure that comes from a third direction. I assume, said he hopefully, that you do see some connection between these two sets, not just that they are similar in that a circle is the basis of it, and there is a little arrow up here. But it would seem to people, to ordinary consciousness, to be two different things, to speak of energy and to speak of pressure. And what I will point out is something quite real, quite scientific. It is not psychological. It's not spiritual. Of course, to tell you the truth, it's named scientific, but I had to call it something. It is observational. It is observational, not from ordinary level. It is why I will eventually, as I promised last week, make up a new word for intelligence. It's not simple yellow circuit activity. It cannot be measured with IQs. It cannot be taught. You have got to already be wired up in a certain way that you can hear and entertain that which is unreasonable, irrational. You can hear, you can entertain that which you should not be able to hear and entertain. That is intelligence. It is intelligence of no particular benefit, speaking of these kinds of levels, if that was the only place at which you were going to operate. All of your dreams about an extraordinary experience or secret knowledge, you should be able to note now, since I'm pointing out in certain ways, it was always your sensation, although you didn't have my terms to use, but it was always your sensation or your impression that the knowledge and the experience was out there. Oh, now you might have said, wait a minute, I believe in God or Buddha or Jehovah or somebody, and so I know that. But still the thing is, it's out there, I'll find it. I will find the teacher, I'll find the guru, I'll find the book. I'll find somebody that can tell me the secret that will be staying behind a tree, behind a door, and I can go up to them and they'll tell me what it is, or they'll show me the book, and it's all operating on a horizontal level. And that's not where it is. Now, all the information, it seems to come through people, men and women. And the story, of course, has always been that there have been prophets of some kind. Gurus have been enlightened, been awakened, and the gods have spoken to them and sent them out to go tell everybody else. That is a reflection of something real, because the energy, the information, the experience, the knowledge does not come horizontally. Now, if you could see in a certain way, which I'm not really going into any further, but I just throw it out, that inside of life's body, energies are the same way as in your body. There's certain energies run in certain directions, and they can't do otherwise. Certain organs in the body, certain areas of the body can only send energy in one way, and sometimes the one way could be, judged from our viewpoint, going down. No way could be going here, assuming that you do not have your spleen under your armpit. The energy is going in a certain direction, and that's the only way it can go. Waiting for energy. I'm still including in my term energy, of course, information, experience. To wait for it to come horizontally is to wait forever. You have got to be able to open yourself up in a certain way, and it comes from somewhere else. But a piece of the connection that I was going to let you surmise, you're also opening yourself up for a lawsuit. No, opening yourself up for pressure coming from additional place. That's what I meant. Notice? Not a lawsuit. The pressure then, you did get another shot of me pointing out that if you could find energy available coming from another direction, in this case I'm making it vertically as opposed to the ordinary flow of horizontal energy, that it would produce their connection I'm suggesting to you most strongly. You then also have a new source of pressure. Then I might suggest that you go back and consider the old ideas of conscience. Everybody talks about it, but damn few got one. And the sensation of it. They're simply descriptions, theories, not that far different from ordinary consciousness as ideas and theories about gods and demons. It is a kind of pressure, and it can't be taught. If it could be taught, then everybody that joined the church would indeed be a true Christian. Everybody that was born and really proclaimed to be a Jew would be a damn Jew. They wouldn't just talk about it. Those who say, I am a Buddhist, they would be a Buddhist and they'd do everything that Buddhists are supposed to do. And since we don't have time or the heart anymore to attack life, you realize we're not attacking life. Simply the way things are. And you can't teach somebody to have a conscience. You notice I hardly ever say that word. I'm not sure I ever said it before. But there is a reality to it. But to say, well, listen, you join our church or you join this religious group and here are the rules, such as you shall not talk about your fellow man in a hostile manner. And almost everybody on this planet that has that's wired up to have the least attraction to any kind of religious system, that's just going to hit them. Almost on any part of this planet, when they hear the basic tenet of our religion is don't hate your fellow man. And everybody goes, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, I found it, this is it. But then all you got to do is be a member there, if you were astute enough, a few days, few months, and you have to come and you have to tell the priest, look, I've enjoyed it all, the food's great, the music's good, but inside I hate people, I curse them, sometimes it still comes out, and I can't stop it. And then the priest has to say, well, look, same thing with me. The gods do not ask that we be perfect, but at least if you still got a conscience. That is, does it bother you when it does it? Well, yeah, mostly when I was thinking about it, yeah. There you are, that's the best we can do. All right. That, too, is serving a purpose, but understand that that is a reflection of something else. They're talking about something. Life is talking through humanity about something that could be possible, that someday very likely will be possible. It's talked about it so long, I suggest to you that you can almost count on the reality behind conscience slowly becoming a real part of humanity. It's already happened. Pieces of it is better. But the reality of it will become part of man's wiring system. But it is not something to suffer over. But also you might, what I'm trying to also hint to you is why it can't be taught, or why when you go join some church or some religious organization that you can't change. But they even use conscience as proof that you are at least one of us, because now you suffer over it. And how you might have suffered over it before, but you didn't know what way to suffer. Now you suffer that this religion with their God or this guru says you shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't. It's just not right. The gods don't like it, I don't like it. And those attracted to it are wired up to feel, yeah, you're right. You don't have to tell me. Don't make me feel any worse. There's your conscience. That proves that you're basically a good person. That proves you're on the right track. But I'm suggesting to you that there is, speaking if I wanted to draw out flow charts, descriptions of quantum movements, that there is a scientific, or for you real pushy people, an actual physical reality to what would be the reality behind the idea of conscience. It would be this new source of pressure that, if you noticed, I drew in the same kind of configuration as the same source of energy. I bet some of you noticed that. I know I did. A kind of pressure wherein it's not a point of suffering. It's not a point of, well, should I do this? It's not a point of, well, I did do it again and I feel bad about it because of these horizontal reasons. That is, because I was told this is not right, and it strikes me as being true, but I was told that. I was told by this religion, with this huge hierarchy, this great history. I was told by this brand new guru that just is very impressive and charismatic. But just please note, you've had all your life, it does not seem to have the desired effect. You can go on and suffer, but you now may have a group of people who get together once or twice a week and all suffer together. It may not be called Alcoholics Anonymous, but it could be called the church. To say that you're suffering is no proof of the existence of a conscience, whatever that might be. But I was sort of hinting to the kind of experience that you people dream of originally, a kind of mystical experience. To be able to feel energy, to be able to take energy from another direction, to be able to see the kinds of things I have detailed, or to be able to see the kinds of things you imagine that Moses and Jesus and Confucius and Buddha saw, Muhammad and everybody else, assuming they saw something. It's not going to come from out here, but it's always coming compared to this direction, taking into account that I'm still talking about three-dimensional existence. As opposed to that, it's coming from another direction. But when you get open to be able to hear the voices, see the pictures, walk the walk, and do the do, you have opened yourself up to a new direction, a new source of pressure. And you will, let me say after 12%, if you can get this up to say 12% and 88%, if you can get 12% and hold it for 3 or 4 hours, I dare say that most of you, taking into account differences in ages and sexes and heights and nose sizes, that you will have a real feeling, a real experience of what, it may take you a while, or maybe you'll remember tonight, but now I'm putting words on which I hate to do. But it's going to be and the relative is going to be, this is what everybody means by conscience, and nobody knows what it is. Because there's no longer something to talk about. It is a goddamned pressure. But the payoff is such, since it's the same direction, that I'm suggesting to you it's very hard to ignore. That you can deny that you're a Christian, a Jew, or a Buddhist, that the circumstances made it profitable. You could deny that you had any interest in morality, anything, if the circumstances so required. But after you know what the payoff is, after you know what the profit is, and after you know that there is a common source to all of this, I suggest that you will understand what conscience is. It's got nothing to do with your religion, nothing to do with your cultural background. It's got nothing to do with any theory that you've ever held, any theory that you ever read about, because it didn't come from out there. It doesn't come in that horizontal direction. The pressure is somewhere else. And those that really understand conscience, there's some things that you can't give up. There'd be some things that your own wiring system, your own partner, might still be inclined to be ignited enough to become almost a raging beast to have his way. And you don't have to theorize about it. It's just you understand, well, I'm not going to pay that fucking price. Because it all comes from the same place. And I can't do that anymore. Nobody has to tell me. There's no rationale for it. I wouldn't describe it to anybody. You know, notice I've never set up any kind of even apparent code of morality around here. The only experience that's worthwhile is an experience that you have had. It's not from some so-called experience or some so-called knowledge that you have taken on the basis of faith, that you just simply scribbled in a notebook and thought that sounds very good, and it was all on the basis of an out there horizontal. One other scientific possibility I might point out, that this changes, although I didn't draw it in exactly a pertinent way for me to jump into this three-dimensional description, but you have changed, and if I could draw it another way, you have, in a sense, equalized the mechanical situation of the pressure to where you're no longer a victim in the same way of the binary pressures. I just threw that in case any of you, foolish as this may sound, if any of you had any interest in being able to live without feeling well, how about almost no pressure? Other than that fear that if I didn't have the pressure, would I get my work done, remember I mentioned. Let's cut the tape. Segue. Try this. Now we're on the other side of the tape. Close it. Wonder why the tape gets cut at least once. It's not really to cut out the tape, it's to turn it over. It's for us to edit and take out all of the fox passes and sophisms and rude noises I make. Try this. It has been, I think, noted, if not, I will note it, as civilization began to arise from the chaos of lower circuit humanity. That is, the real beginnings of yellow circuit having some sway over the blue, and the blue already having had some circuit over that great equalizer, the red circuit. That you could look at it in one way and say civilization could be gauged by, at any particular area, as the development of towns, of cities, of these previously rather unsociable beasts. Let me remind everyone out there on tape, I am not speaking in a Darwinian evolutionary sense. I am not referring to any archaeological finds of man being a progeny of apes. I am talking in a way that is not necessarily literally physical. I am speaking of a way having to do with man at one time being primarily run by the red circuit, which all of you have been. Go back and look at your pictures of when you first came out of the hospital as a child. It is a time when you were primarily controlled by the blue circuit. So I'm not talking about humanity living in caves. I'm not talking literally about that. I am not, however, saying that there's not any basis for that. I'm just saying forget it. I'm not talking about horizontal Darwinian evolution of any nature. I try and hold that in mind as I talk, which is impossible unless you really belong here. And then, of course, you begin to get these astoundingly pleasant headaches. So remember, I am not. I'll shift back and forth when I have to keep your attention. It sounds like I am talking about ordinary horizontal evolution, that perhaps I'm trying to insinuate times 8,000 years ago, and all these hairy-looking beasts that were just one step above apes finally getting together and deciding that they had common interests and they'd be better off living together than fighting. I ain't talking about that necessarily. I'm not even insinuating that that will ever happen. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It's just irrelevant right now, so listen. I'm just using, again, the horizontal world of these great examples that life always produces to try and trick you into thinking that which you should not think, to perceiving that which you not perceive, leading you into an experience of understanding, which is the experience. At any rate, it could be looked at that civilization would really be gauged at any particular time by the development of cities, of humanity coming together. But then, let me point out, if it has not been pointed out already somewhere, I could also define a city, among many other ways, but I could define a city as that place where you could store food. Because everything, remember, always gets back down to the mining and the manufacturing level. It always gets back to the red circuit. We would not be sitting here unless all of us had enough food to eat. I don't care whether you eat cheeseburgers from the Huddle House or the White Castle, or whether you're eating health foods and yogurt every day, or whether you live off coffee every other day of the week. Remember this, we would not be sitting here, we would not be all dressed up, we would not be driving cars, we would not be having great thoughts, we would not be pursuing our fields of vocation or avocation in the music, the arts, or the sciences, unless you fed yourself. It's real easy to forget for those who are not worried about a meal every day, for those of us in this part of the world. So cities, which I could also make city/civilization, that is one of the ways to define an area being civilized, is cities do come together, people come together. But then I could define, not incorrectly, that cities are a place to store food because of this. There has got to be a source of food here in an area that's not agricultural, that is the city. It has got to be able to be stored there to feed the specialists that live in cities, non-agricultural specialists, people that only do one thing: a blacksmith, an accountant, God forbid, an attorney, God forbid, a cabinet maker. Again, if you want to take the ordinary stories, which I'm not saying yea or nay, of ordinary evolution, of people going from, of humanity going from, everybody raised their own food, anything else you need, you did it. You did it, or you did it without. If you wanted something to wear, you had to make it. There was no Bloomingdale's. If you decided you needed furniture for your cave, if people ever lived in caves, you had to make yourself a recliner. You could not go and buy one. But one definition of civilization is my definition of me telling you cities is a place where people who did not raise food gathered, and they engaged in a specialized enterprise, and that was it. One guy became a furniture maker. One guy sewed up leaves or skins into clothes. And then those who did not live in the city, that raised the food, brought in the food and swapped it, but there had to be a place they had to store it. There had to be, to some degree, continual supply, a steady supply of food there to keep these specialists going, because the guy who made chairs might not sell a chair every day. You might also realize where bankers came from. They were the legitimate offsprings of accountants and attorneys. Cheap joke, cheap joke. All right. Now let's take our death-defying leap from the world of history and take what I just said, that civilization, progress at the horizontal level, had to be that there was an area where food could be stored so that there was a continuing supply to these in-town specialists. Put on your tights and cape, and can you leap from that real quick to apparent history out there to you're in the same position. Humanity has slowly, each person, gotten in that position. But to attempt to do this what you're having to do is to take the necessary basic, absolute basic food, and it's no longer just onion sandwiches. It is no longer just physical food. It is nowadays other kinds of food. The blue circuit must be fed. The yellow circuit must be fed. But within you, you have to be able to establish what amounts to an instant town. There has to be a place that the minimal food can be stored, that there is a continual basis for it, a storehouse of it, so that specialists can go about their business, and their business is not the production of this minimal food. Unless you can produce a civilized city within yourself, you're in the position that almost all of you still feel to some degree, that this is a running battle, or it feels as though at times I'm beginning to understand something. At times it feels as though my emotional life has stabilized or gone even to another level. And then I seem to be just drained of all that I seem to have gained, and I'm back hating, I'm back feeling sorry for myself, I'm back in the hands of my partner, I'm back at line level consciousness. I went through all this about cities and civilization and all that crap because there is, as always, at least always when I come up with them, an absolute perfect parallel that it does amount to in a very real sense. I truly hope everyone heard that I didn't convolute it too much. But my description of a city, of civilization being able to take hold and become stable in some area, that there's got to be specialists. There can no longer simply be red circuit people. You cannot simply have nothing but farmers or cattle people, herdsmen. You will not have what passes for civilization. The people would not move. And don't worry about what I'm talking about 8,000 years ago maybe, or what I'm talking about right now in New Guinea. They cannot all be working in the mines. They cannot all be working at the red level. It is necessary that go on, but that is not where humanity is today. That was a stage. They cannot simply have produced what I have been referring to as a kind of blue circuit, a kind of almost overseer of the red folks. They have to become civilized, and to become civilized, they have got to have more than one occupation, to wit, the raising of food. If you were living at the red circuit level, that's all you would need. If you were right now an uncivilized, feral, almost illiterate, non-literate, living in a non-literate society somewhere, all you would need, all that would be necessary, would be food. That's it. Of course, sex. But you got to have that all the time, so. I assume you people know that by now. But all they would need is food. For things to move, people have got to begin to specialize. So when you stop everyone from simply raising the minimal food to keep this group going, then people begin to specialize. And then one group, they raise the food. One group builds shelter. One group builds furnishings for the shelter. One group takes over the care, medical or otherwise. But for the thing to start, I want to make sure that you see the simplicity of it, is they have to get together somewhere and set up a town, a city, a community, so that those raising the food can bring it there, and the specialists can begin to create their specialty, to teach themselves, to teach generations, to begin to hone their skills of prescribing herbs and medicines, to building chairs that do not collapse, to building structures that are sturdy. And that's when they began to exchange food, one group to another group building us a house, exchange food for somebody building you furniture for the house. But there has to be a place to store food. That's the minimal level. That these guys that are working now in specialized areas that are no longer, they've left the land, they gave it to somebody. They got nowhere to raise food like none of us do, probably. You know, if A&P goes out of business, you know, you're going to be eating your shoes. They have left the land. But they can't depend every day that some farmers are going to come in and bring in corn and say, I need a bed and here's corn. And he goes, phew, I'll get to eat after all. There had to be a place to store it, and there had to be a rather constant supply for the specialist. Can you see that you must do the same thing internally? That you must be able, in a certain very particular way, to store up, to have available, is really a better description, but I'll stick with my story since I made it up, and I already use that term. I'll use it for a few more minutes until I distract you and switch it. To be able to store up, put aside, have available minimal food, or else you cannot specialize. You cannot do this. Connected with this kind of storage, I might add you as my great medical truism that everyone enjoys about fuck good health. Fuck health. You've got to get to the place that you have got a kind of reserve. That the minimal feeding, not just of food, but the minimal feeding of feeding attention, of feeding information just at a very mechanical horizontal level to the yellow circuit, feeding whatever the blue circuit needs, which it does not need, sad stories, soap operas, worrying about that which cannot be changed. But there has got to be in you what amounts to your own city, and that the minimal food of all sorts is always available, as though it just continually put in storage and you can draw upon it while specializing in another area. If you don't, you end up spending your time having to always run back to the fields, always having to run back to the mines, always having to seek out that which you shouldn't having to be seeking out anymore. It should be there. I already asked good night about two things I mentioned that I brought up an old one and it didn't fit. How about this one? I got another one for you. Here's the line, here's the basis of it. It's what is ordinarily known, ordinarily keeps one from a new knowing. What is ordinarily known ordinarily keeps one from the getting of any new knowing. Now those that could hear and see in a certain way, I could prove that scientifically as much as I can prove anything. But before I attempt it, if I do, if this be true, how could that fit in with one of my other great scientific axioms, if you recall, when I pointed out that if a person could remember everything that they already knew, they'd know it all. That it's not really a problem of getting new knowledge all the time, because if everybody could just remember everything they knew simultaneously or constantly remember it all at one time, you wouldn't need to know anything else. How can those two be true? Go back to the first one. I'll bet a lot of you can already put some flesh on that. That what you know ordinarily is a constant bar, is a constant hindrance to learning anything else. And I have approached it from all sorts of directions, many times having to do with words themselves, tricks, descriptions, and tasks I've given in the past about seeing how the system is running and describing experience and so-called reality in such a way that one cannot stop and question it. The voices seem to be speaking for you. And it's saying, I don't like this, I'm mad at that, this frightens me. That is reality. But that is what is ordinarily known. Anything that you knew outside of another direction is what I mean by ordinarily known. And anything that you already know is in fact a bar to learning anything else. I repeat, if I was so foolish and had the time and the energy, I could prove it, damn it. But at the same time, if a person could remember everything they already knew, they wouldn't need to know anything else. Which I hopefully assume that some of you can see that verbally is a contradiction to the first one. And they're both true. Based upon what little energy I'm getting back tonight, I think I'm going to leave that one with you. Except some of you should really pursue that everything that's ordinarily known as a bar, it is at the very least a severe hindrance. Severe. And the difference between severe hindrance and a bar is almost like that. From learning anything new, not new horizontally now, but from any new knowing, everything you already know, anything that was ordinarily known, stands somewhere between being an absolute bar and a severe hindrance. God, that's depressing to think about. Of course, I've had a few years to get depressed. Thus far, it hasn't been fatal. I've got a task I want everyone to attempt. If you were suddenly born, let's take horizontal. Nah, let's be more up to date. The whole world blows itself up as far as you know except you. You wander around a while and then you find a group of some more people and they seem to be more dazed, more squirrely, in worse shape than even you are. Well, plus it just seems from your splendid viewpoint that you can just look at them and tell, even back in our better days, you wouldn't have been quite up to my level. In other words, you felt to this small group that if anyone was going to be a natural leader, you had to be it to help civilization get going again. By that premise. My question is to you, I want you to consider it yourself. How many of you, and in what ways, could you begin to reinvent civilization? For instance, now everybody could contribute something, but what could you contribute? Let's say that just destroyed the people, knocked out most of the power plants, but that almost civilization was still around, the buildings. What could you personally do? What could you actually reinvent? Could you go back and reinvent technology? If so, what kind? Could you actually go back and reinvent the internal combustion engine? Or play around somewhere in this area. If not absolutely invent it from the scratch, could you go back and find generators, automobiles, and put them back in working order, whatever it took? Could you go back and reinvent some of the sciences? Could you go back and reinvent chemistry? Do you even know where iron comes from? Do you think it comes from bottles out of Kroger's vitamin department? Or do some of you suspect that iron somewhere is in the ground? I heard one time. Could you invent chemistry? Could you invent mathematics? Not just to say 2 and 2 is 4, but could you begin to invent it in such a way that it would help progress, just in a horizontal sense, you and this group of people? How many of you could reinvent music, art? How could you make paints if all the paint supply stores got blew up? You know, where did paint come from? Do you think paint just actually came in tubes from art supply stores? Have you ever thought, well, hey, paint had to come from somewhere? Did you one time hear some notion that some of this paint, I think they take dirt and kind of mix it up with something? If it was left up to you, how much of civilization could you reinvent to any discernible, usable degree? If this group was looking at you, and you can play around with any way you want to, I'll leave you all away from it, just destroyed everything, that the whole planet's just a pile of rubble, or there's still some artifact standing What could you go back in and get generators started up if there were some power plants still going? Could you get a radio station back on the air? What could you do? How much of civilization could you reinvent there in a few years? And the remainder of your years that would, just at the quite ordinary horizontal level, apparently get things started again. Could any of you reinvent fire? Could you make a match? Any of you who find this of interest, and won't write down any of it, I'd like to see it.